Volkswagen's improved Sirocco remains the beautifully designed, solidly built and super stylish affordable coupe it always was. Crucially though, it now features a more efficient range of more powerful engines, along with some subtle changes that lift its desirability up a notch or two. In launching the original 70s version of its Sirocco coupe, Volkswagen was said to have democratised the sports car. In introducing the improved third generation version we're going to look at here, it hopes to have redefined that original recipe. The name refers to a hot wind that blows from the Sahara Desert to the Mediterranean and designates a model line actually predating that of the Golf, with a history stretching all the way back to 1974, when this car marked a new era for front-engined, front-wheel drive Volkswagens in Europe. It was certainly very different from the rear-driven, boxer-engined Carman gear model it replaced, though not much faster. Early versions offered with as little as 60 brake horsepower. The iconically wedgy Giugiaro styling looked good though, which was all most buyers cared about. Less memorable was the second generation version launched in 1981, though at least by now more powerful engines were featuring beneath the bonnet. The launch of the smaller Corrado coupe in 1989 spelt the end of the first phase of Sirocco history, but loyal owners never forgot it, and in 2008 the badge was back on the pretty tailgate of the third generation version that we're looking at here. This time round, style really was mixed with substance, the shape based on an IROC badged concept car that had wowed the crowds at the Paris Motor Show a couple of years before. Like its predecessors, this Sirocco was Golf-based, or more specifically Golf GTI-based, given that early models could only be ordered with the 2-litre turbocharged engine from that car. In time, though, the range gained more affordable petrol versions, a selection of diesels, and in 2009, a potent 265 PS flagship R-badged variant that at launch was one of the fastest contenders in its class. All of that was enough to keep Volkswagen well placed in the affordable coupe segment for some time. But by 2014, this Mark III model was at last beginning to show its age. Not in terms of its looks, the shape still turns heads. When it came to technology and efficiency, though, an update was clearly needed to keep the car current in the face of competition from rivals like Peugeot's RCZ, Vauxhall's GTC, and the Volkswagen Group's other contender in this sector, the Seat Leon SC. Hence the higher trim levels and lower running costs of this updated version, a car also improved with a subtle restyle. Will it all be enough? Let's find out. Not much has changed with this improved Sirocco in terms of the driving experience it can offer. To be honest, not much needed to. The standard in this class hasn't in recent times been set noticeably higher than it was when this car first made its appearance back in 2008, which perhaps tells you all you need to know about the priorities of buyers and manufacturers in the affordable coupe segment. In terms of what you get, it's easy to pigeonhole the driving experience of this car in the same way that some will dismiss its design, seeing it as a gussied-up Golf. It never was quite that. The Sirocco's suspension setup, centre of gravity and wider track have always been different, and since the introduction in 2012 of the 7th generation Golf, the fundamental gap between the two cars has widened further. Not for this model, it's hatchback stablemate's latest generation super light high-tech MQB platform, or the driver profile electronics that would enable you to alter your Sirocco's throttle response and steering feel at the touch of a button. This Volkswagen coupe remains instead broadly based on chassis technology developed closer to the turn of the century, which means that at the wheel you can't help wondering just how much better it could be if it were based on more up-to-date underpinnings. The newer tech third generation Audi TT, a car that uses some of the same engines but mates them to MQB underpinnings, offers a tantalising glimpse into the answer to that question. But then the Audi, like its close rival the BMW 2 Series, is significantly more expensive than a Scirocco and significantly less usable as a four-seater. Both of these key issues for potential owners of this car. If you look at coupes in this segment that can deliver to this criteria, cars like the Vauxhall GTC and the Kia Proceed, you're not looking at dynamic targets that give this Volkswagen anything to worry about. Anyway, the fact that it doesn't use the Volkswagen Group's latest MQB chassis isn't a complete negative. The cars that do, not only the Golf but also this car's coupe segment rival Seat's Leon SC, have to make do with old-fashioned torsion beam suspension in their mainstream guises. This Sirocco, in contrast, gets a proper, supple rear multi-link system right across the range, which is why it rides so much better than a lower-order Golf. You get this setup even on the feeblest version, that with 1.4 litre TSI petrol power, an engine Volkswagen wisely hasn't tried to mate with the sprint-sapping 6-speed DSG automatic gearbox that's an option across the rest of the range. Stir the stick yourself in a Sirocco 1.4 and the 62 miles an hour benchmark can be reached in 9.2 seconds en route to 126 miles an hour. For performance that better suits the looks of this car, though, you'll need a 2-litre TSI petrol variant, possibly the 180 PS version that manages 62 miles an hour in 7.4 seconds on the way to 141 miles an hour, but more probably the 220 PS derivative with its Golf GTI engine. Here, the at-the-wheel experience is much more satisfying, 62 miles an hour occupying 6.5 seconds en route to 153 miles an hour. It's a level of performance that might make you question the necessity of paying the vast premium Volkswagen asks for ownership of the flagship Sirocco R model, which uses the same 2-litre TSI turbo engine but boosts its power to 280 PS, 15 PS more than this top variant offered in pre-facelift form. This unit's very similar to that used in the Golf R Super Hatch, but where that car puts its torque to the tarmac via 4-motion 4-wheel drive, this souped-up Sirocco must continue to scrabble away with its front wheels, relying on revised settings for its springs, dampers and anti-roll bars to tune its dynamic delivery. What will help in this regard are two features Sirocco R buyers get as standard: the XDS electronic differential lock that helps you get traction down through the corners, and DCC dynamic chassis control that via normal, comfort or sport options allows you to set up the suspension to suit the mood you're in and the road you're on. Mind you, both of those things can be specified at extra cost on almost any Sirocco. In fact, I've got the DCC set up on the variant I'm testing here, which is one of the diesels, a 2-litre TDI 184 PS variant. This, the engine you'll find in both an Audi TT and a Golf GTD, is a willing partner for fast-flowing motoring. 380 newton meters of torque propelling the car through the gears and from rest to 62 miles an hour in 7.5 seconds en route to around 143 miles an hour. Well, that's whether you opt for 6-speed manual transmission or the 6-speed DSG auto gearbox that I'm trying here. If you don't need to go quite that fast, then a 150 PS version of this same engine manages 8.6 seconds and 134 miles an hour. Once you've made your engine choice, you'll settle into Sirocco ownership much more quickly if you appreciate that this isn't really a backroad brawler. Buy a hot hatch if you really want that. Yes, you can take it by the scruff of the neck and throw it about if you really want to, but the car responds best to smooth inputs and is in its element on fast-flowing A-roads, terrain that tends to mask the rather benign feeling delivered via the electromechanical steering. If you're in a DSG version with its slick steering wheel paddles, you can quickly get into a quick, rewarding driving rhythm. For many, this is exactly what a rapid, affordable coupe should feel like. If there's one thing you absolutely have to get right with an affordable coupe, indeed with a coupe of any kind, it's the look of the thing. You might think that to be something of a self-evident truth, but it only takes a brief look around this segment to confirm that not every brand has nailed this fundamental aspect. Some contenders, like coupe versions of the Renault Megane or the Mini, are awkwardly proportioned, while others, like Kia's Proceed and Seat's Leon SC, seem merely to be what they essentially are: three-door hatchbacks with skirts and spoilers. This third-generation Sirocco has always stood as a study in how the job should be done. Yes, like almost every other car in this class, it's based on a sensible family hatchback, but the trimmings here give the end result far more of an exotic feel. As a small boy, I had a picture of the original Giugiaro-styled Mark I Sirocco sellotaped to my bedroom wall, and were I that age again, I'd have this car pinned up there too. Everywhere you look, there seems to be delicious detailed touches: the frameless doors, the subtle aerodynamic rear wing, the pronounced haunches that sweep gracefully over the rear wheel arches, with accentuation by a tapered sill line that pinches artfully around the middle of the vehicle. Barstool experts not seduced by this car's fashionable finery will be quick to dismiss it as a Golf in a cocktail dress, but that's a simplistic summary given that a Sirocco is 93mm shorter, 11mm wider and sits 52mm lower. It's also got a much wider track, a significantly lower centre of gravity and a substantially different suspension setup. Yes, the engine range is largely shared, but in almost every other respect, this Volkswagen Coupe is very much its own car. In some ways, that's not ideal. Though the next fourth-generation version will get the advanced MQB platform that underpins the seventh-generation Golf, this revised Mark III model must soldier on with far older underpinnings that date all the way back to a fifth-generation Golf model launched as long ago as 2004. That's restricted what the designers could do with this refreshed Sirocco, so it's just as well that few far-reaching changes were needed. They certainly didn't need to dramatically update the styling, inspired by the brand's 2006 IROC concept car and used ever since to define the look of the company's mainstream models. Or at least the front end has been. Here updated with a front bumper that takes styling cues from the latest Golf GTI. Deep front air dams and a razor-thin grille element with a gloss black insert are framed by now smarter and more distinctive chrome-backed headlight units. Otherwise, though, the Sirocco is styled uniquely, even when compared to other coupes. The sloping roof you'd expect from a model in this segment is instead here replaced by a steep hatch with a long roof and a vertical tailgate, an approach delivering two key advantages. The first is a squat but purposeful appearance. The second, and arguably more important attribute, is that the upright rear and short overhangs give this car a significant amount of space in the rear for two adults and their luggage. Let's start with that, and on the way note a small but welcome change that sees the Volkswagen badge on the tailgate now function as a handle. Previously there was no exterior boot catch. Raise the hatch and a 312-litre cargo area is revealed, 30% more than you get in a Toyota GT86, for instance, and a decent amount for a car that looks as stylish as a coupe should. It's worth noting that the competitors in this segment that can beat a Sirocco's luggage capacity are the ones that look less like coupes and more like sporty three-door hatchbacks, cars like Seat's Leon SC, Kia's Proceed and the Vauxhall GTC. Bear in mind, though, that there's a high loading lip over which bulky packages must be lifted. If these items necessitate the need for more space, then pushing forward the 50-50 split rear sports chairs frees up 1,006 litres of fresh air. Now, I deliberately called these back seats sports chairs because that's what they are. Instead of the kind of afterthought rear seat accommodation that rivals offer, these sculpted items make a place behind the driver less of a penance than it usually is in a coupe of this kind. There's more leg and headroom than you expect, though the low roofline and shallow window line may irritate those inclined towards claustrophobia. The optional panoramic glass roof would certainly assist things in this regard, and it would further help if Volkswagen could be persuaded to offer more trim options in lighter colours. Black, for example, is the only shade available to those wanting the leather upholstery I have here. The fact that the roofline doesn't slope backwards in the usual coupe style also makes it easier to get in and out, a process aided by a folding mechanism that returns the seat to the position that it was before you pushed it forward. Up front, not much has been done to update the driving environment, which might make it feel a little dated to those familiar with one of the Volkswagen Group's more recent designs. A central infotainment display is provided. Here I've got the larger 6.5-inch version, but it still looks a little old tech compared to the trendier colour touchscreen provided in a 7th generation Golf. Still, in other respects, the original design has effectively stood the test of time. The triangular grab handles on the doors still add a touch of interest, and the sports seats with their integrated headrests are great. I'd go for the optional Recaro ones. Either way, though, you're positioned perfectly in front of a contoured, flat-bottomed sports steering wheel that still feels good to hold, framing a clear, concise set of dials that glow white at night. Probably the biggest change up front is the addition of this pod on top of the dash, apparently an aesthetic reference to the similar setup used in sporty versions of the first-generation Sirocco model. It certainly makes the cockpit feel a little more purposeful, briefing you on oil temperature, turbo boost and chronometer functions. Otherwise, it's all as you were, so still the same old style switchgear and still the same restricted letterbox-shaped view out behind that's further impeded by the rear seat headrests. It all means that on entry-level models, you'll need to make sure you pay extra for parking sensors. Most versions of this Volkswagen Coupe are sold in the £21,000 to £28,000 bracket, though it is possible to pay over £35,000 for one if you're tempted by the fastest Sirocco R variant. Most won't want to stretch quite that far and will be content with top mainstream 2-litre TSI petrol and 2-litre TDI diesel variants that require the mid-range GT trim level most customers prefer. These models are mechanically identical and priced very similarly to equivalent petrol and diesel versions of the 3-door Golf GTI. Most of the Sirocco engines on offer give customers the option of paying around £1,500 extra for a 6-speed DSG automatic gearbox. Meanwhile, buyers with running cost targets to meet may be pleasantly surprised to find that throughout the range, the premium to move from a petrol model to a comparably performing diesel version is relatively slight. Time to look at the value proposition this car's overall pricing represents. Now, you'd expect a proper coupe like this to cost a little more than a comparable hot hatch. As I've already said, the variance is slight if you're comparing against a Golf GTI, but if you were to put a top mainstream petrol or diesel Sirocco up against, say, an equivalent Ford Focus ST, the difference could be as much as around £5,000. We're going to assume here, though, that you've accepted the need to pay a premium for coupe ownership and want to know exactly how this car stacks up to similar models. In terms of similarity, you're probably not going to get much more of a closer match than Seat's Leon SC. This car shares most of this Sirocco's mechanicals and, because it's a more modern design, sits on the Volkswagen Group's more up-to-date MQB underpinnings. The Leon also offers model-for-model savings over directly comparable versions of this Sirocco that can be as much as £3,000. Now, all of this would be very significant if the Leon SC was styled as more of a coupe and less like an ordinary 3-door hatchback. Unfortunately, it isn't, and that fact alone will discount it as an option for many buyers. These are people who may also feel the same about the other most direct rival to this car, Vauxhall's GTC. In both name and style, this car has now distanced itself from the humble Astra hatch it's based upon, but it still can't muster up the street-side presence of a Sirocco. which is a problem for Vauxhall given that most mainstream GTC models are priced within around £1,500 of their Sirocco equivalents. The other mainstream brand you might look at in this segment is Peugeot, whose striking RCZ coupe has been priced directly against this Volkswagen. It's certainly stylish, but its back seats are near useless and it costs more to run than a comparable Sirocco. Again, these are telling differences. Other options really depend on the part of the Sirocco range you're looking at. Those shopping for a base petrol or diesel variant might be tempted to save £3,000 or more by opting for cars like the Kia Proceed or the Mini Coupe. But these options don't quite have the class of this Volkswagen. A rung higher in the Sirocco lineup brings you to the 2-litre TSI 180 PS version, which requires exactly the same kind of £23,000 budget that will get you the similarly performing rear-wheel drive coupe design we know as either a Toyota GT86 or a Subaru BRZ. Now, these two Japanese alternatives are certainly great fun, but again, if you're looking to get your style and driving dynamics allied to the more sensible virtues of practicality and efficiency, then this Volkswagen remains a better choice. Are there other alternatives you could look at? Well, a few. For £2,000 to £3,000 more than just about any Sirocco, you could get yourself a comparably performing BMW 2 Series Coupe. And if you're thinking of spending £26,000 to £27,000 on the Sirocco 2-litre TSI 220 turbo petrol variant that many customers like, you might want to think long and hard first. After all, that kind of budget could buy you significantly more performance if you were to spend it on cars like the Vauxhall Astra VXR, the Renault Sport Megane 265 or Nissan's 370Z. All these three, though, would cost a lot more to run. Some buyers looking at top mainstream petrol and diesel Sirocco models, a car like this one, may also be tempted to look at finding the £3,500 premium that would get them into the more exclusive but less practical Audi TT that shares much of this car's technology. Finally, a word about the top Sirocco R flagship variant. It's ambitiously priced above comparably performing coupes like Audi's TT 2-litre TFSI and BMW's 228i M Sport, though if you equalise the spec between these three cars, then there probably wouldn't be much in it. We think, though, that many potential Sirocco buyers will be more vexed by the fact that this top R variant costs nearly £2,500 more than its slightly more powerful Golf R stablemate and lacks that car's four-wheel drive system. But then, as I've been saying all the way through, you've got to accept the need to pay a premium and make a few sacrifices to own a coupe. It's always been like that. If, having carefully considered all of this, you decide that it is a Sirocco that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Volkswagen has been when it comes to the standard spec. Well, the answer is that most of the basics you'll be wanting are indeed fitted across the range, plus a few other niceties. So, all models come complete with alloy wheels of at least 17 inches in size, daytime running lights, LED rear lamps, power heated mirrors, auto headlamps and wipers, and an alarm. Inside, you'll find a leather-trimmed multifunction steering wheel, air conditioning with a pollen filter, sports instrument dials, a trip computer, aluminium inlays, and an auto-dimming rearview mirror. You also get a touchscreen infotainment display via which you can access a 6-speaker stereo system with a 6-CD auto-changer and a DAB radio, plus aux-in, USB and iPod connectivity. We can understand, though, why most Sirocco customers find the model-for-model premium of around £1,800 that Volkswagen asks to upgrade this car to plusher GT spec. The extra cash gets you these smarter 18-inch Interlagos alloy wheels, front fog lights, rear tinted glass and all-round parking sensors. Inside there's satellite navigation, the sports seats have Alcantara side bolsters and you brush your brogues on aluminium look pedals while being cooled by a 2-zone climate control system. In this case, we've been given 3 options that many potential buyers will want to look at. First and foremost, we've been trying the DCC dynamic chassis control setup that allows you to tweak the suspension to suit the road that you're on and the mood you're in. This Sirocco also features Titan Black Vienna leather upholstery and an upgraded infotainment system with a 30GB hard drive, DVD navigation, an SD card reader and voice control. To this, we'd also want to add the XDS electronic differential lock that aids traction and handling. Other extra cost options buyers might also want to look at include the lovely Recaro sports seats I'd certainly want, perhaps with 12-way electric adjustment. Then there are bi-xenon headlamps, even bigger 19-inch wheels, keyless entry, cruise control, a rear view camera and a park assist system that helps steer you into spaces. Or you could just blow any extra budget on the lovely panoramic glass sunroof or the thumping 400-watt Dynaudio sound system. On to safety, an area of development which has been transformed since this Volkswagen was first launched in 2008. Not much of that is reflected in this car. The high-tech MQB underpinnings that support advanced safety electronics are being reserved for the next generation Sirocco model. Still, this one does get twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus a tyre pressure loss indicator, anti-whiplash head restraints, a pedestrian-friendly bonnet, Isofix child seat fastenings, a hill hold function that stops you drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and the option of a driver alert system that monitors your reactions for drowsiness. Plus, of course, you get all the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. Across the mainstream range, this improved Sirocco gets the benefits of Volkswagen's Blue Motion technology program, which includes battery regeneration, that's to reclaim energy that would otherwise be lost under braking, and a start-stop engine system to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Now, the result is fuel efficiency improvements across the range, which can be as high as 19%. It also helps that all of the direct injection turbocharged engines on offer are pretty modern, though the same can't be said of the DSG automatic gearbox that can be specified here. Volkswagen's latest 7-speed DSG transmission actually improves your running costs, but unfortunately that setup is incompatible with this car. So buyers must be satisfied with an older tech 6-speed unit that on mainstream models still exacts a 10% penalty over the manual alternative. As you'd expect, the most eye-catching running cost figures are delivered by the 2-litre TDI diesel variants. It's tempting to think that not too much has changed with these, but in fact, these units are the new generation EU6 compatible ones introduced with the 7th generation Golf. They're different in virtually every way from the 2-litre TDIs used in the pre-facelifted version of this car, now featuring an oxidation catalytic converter, a diesel particulate filter and an NOx storage catalytic converter. The warm-up process is faster and more efficient too, something I've noticed on the winter days of this test, the cabin heating getting going surprisingly quickly. None of this would matter very much, of course, if it made little impact on the bottom line figures, but it does. The last time we tested a diesel version of this car, it managed 52 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle. This time round, a Sirocco 2-litre TDI 150 delivers 67.3 miles to the gallon to that parameter and 109 grams per kilometre of CO2. Choose the 184 PS version of this engine, that's the one I'm trying here, and the returns aren't very much affected, falling only marginally to 64.2 miles to the gallon and 115 grams per kilometre, or 58.9 miles to the gallon and 125 grams per kilometre in the case of this DSG automatic version. See what I mean about the impact DSG makes? Opt to fuel from the green pump and you get a choice between Volkswagen's pioneering TSI forced induction petrol engines, with the entry-level 1.4 litre 125 PS unit offering a relatively frugal option for buyers prioritising style over speed. Here, 52.3 miles to the gallon is possible on the combined cycle, along with a CO2 return of 125 grams per kilometre. But the performance you get as part of the deal is quite leisurely, which is why most buyers upgrade themselves to one of the 2-litre TSI units. There's a 180 PS version of this engine, but since you can also have it in pokier 220 PS guise with no running cost penalty, it seems a pity not to go for the faster option. Here, the combined cycle figure is 47.1 miles to the gallon, and the CO2 return is 139 grams per kilometre. For the sake of completeness, I'll also give you the returns of the top 2-litre TSI 280 PS Sirocco R variant. This manages 35.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 187 grams per kilometre of CO2 in manual form, though for some reason in this case Volkswagen's engineers have been able to get the 6-speed DSG automatic gearbox to function more efficiently. Go for this option, the DSG, and the figures improve to 35.8 miles to the gallon and 185 grams per kilometre. Now that might sound like a marginal improvement, but it's enough to push this particular derivative into a lower tax band if you get it with DSG, and that'll save owners about £145 a year. Every little helps. Owners, of course, will have to do their part in achieving these figures, which will be a tad more difficult to do in this car than it would be in its Golf stablemate. Most Golf buyers do, after all, get a driver profile system with a frugal eco mode, as well as an eco section on the dashboard infotainment screen and the option of downloading the brand's clever Think Blue Trainer app for efficiency tuition. This Sirocco's older technology means that there's none of that sort of thing here, just a gear change indicator on the dash. What else? Well, there's an unremarkable 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty. As for maintenance costs, these can be kept down thanks to the way that you can choose a servicing regime to suit your likely use. Time and distance servicing for low mileage users, and a long life program for buyers likely to use their cars much more. It'll also help that all the gearboxes used across the range are filled with lifetime oil and need no routine maintenance. That only leaves insurance, which in terms of groupings start at 21E for the base 1.4 TSI variant, rising to 30E for the 2-litre TSI 180 PS, 35E for the 2-litre TSI 220 PS, and 39E for the top Sirocco R. Go for a TDI and you'll find the 150 PS version rated at Group 26E, and the 184 PS variant I'm trying here rated at Group 29E. The Volkswagen Scirocco was a formula that didn't need wholesale changes, and with this Mark III model product update, it didn't really get them. The under-bonnet revisions are well worthwhile though, offering more power across the board, teamed with greater efficiency. The styling improvements amount to little more than a bit of sympathetic tweaking, but the interior does now look a little more contemporary. Now that was needed given the big step forward the 7th generation Golf made over its predecessor in 2013. And while the Sirocco still doesn't feel quite as glitzy inside as its hatchback stablemate, it remains leagues better in this respect than many of its mainstream rivals. The fact that those same competitors also struggle to match this car's overall proposition in so many other areas says an awful lot for a design that does, after all, date as far back as 2008. Yes, it relies heavily on its looks, but then a classy coupe always should. Fortunately, this one can offer more than that. Premium quality matched with typically thorough Volkswagen engineering and attention to detail. Of course, it isn't perfect. This model's successor will need to be sharper to drive and build in more of the latest electronic safety features buyers are now beginning to expect for this kind of money. Those things, though, clearly aren't deal breakers in the affordable coupe segment. This car's continuing sales prominence testifies to that. In summary, if you want a coupe that looks good, is well screwed together, and which isn't going to cost a fortune to run, Volkswagen still has your back. Thankfully, though, this car also offers something a little extra. Call it charisma, call it personality, call it what you want. The Sirocco has it.